Hello. So now we're going to move away from hider spawn, right? Where do we go after hider spawn? Well, of course, depending on the game situations, it obviously depends on where you want to go after hider spawn. But typically, if it's a normal game, right, under ideal conditions where there's no good hiders, the place you want to head towards is in this tunnel because, well, most of the time you'll find hiders hiding in here. It's not as common as hider spawn, but there are some pretty common spots in here that you gotta know about, right? Like, not super uncommon, but like, in a normal game, you're gonna find at least 1 or 2 hiders hiding in this tunnel per game, right? For hider spawn, usually almost always at least 1 in this area besides the tree. Same thing for before hider spawn. Before hider spawn, at least 1 hider per game. Right? Many times you'll find more than that. Right? If you look at some of my videos in the past, you will observe that, well, there's definitely been many times where hiders hide in those spots, obviously. So now, we're going to look at the inside of the next tunnel. Right? This is the spot we typically head towards after hider spawn. Right? We head over here. Right? So we're going to look at all the different common hiding spots in this room. Okay. Starting with the entrance to the tunnel. Right? Basically, if I just show you that again, basically, just like the tunnel before hider spawn, right? It has an L shape. Another thing, right? I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons between the tunnel I'm entering and the tunnel before hider spawn, which is the one over there. Right? The other thing that it has in common is the fact that we have these leaves again. Flower pots can hide on top of these leaves, so it's really important to keep track of hiders on top of these leaves, right? And again, they can hide on top of these leaves as well. So as you see, you can go all the way up here, so this would be fake. Right? Again, they can go up here as well, right? Just like that, right? Just like that, okay. That's basically it for that one. Now we just go up here. Right, just like that, right? Just like that. Now we go over here. Actually, no, we can't even get on top of these ones. And these ones as well. Oh, just made a mistake. Alright, that's basically it. And then, of course, these ones. Now, if you do shoot a hider right here, right? Let's say that you shoot a hider, like you shoot me, right? Flower pot, I'm gonna fall under here, so I actually fall down right here. So you'll actually notice that, right? This is the only leaves that do that. That's why. So it's important to know that because you're like, oh, okay, now I know what happens, right? That's really the idea. So again, just like the previous tunnel, you're gonna find flower pots on top of those leaves many times. These ones, not so much. There's a little bit more important stuff than these leaves as for this over here, right? But basically, right, that's what we have in common. What's another thing to observe about this room? Well, notice how we have this bookshelf thing. This is really similar to what we saw in the previous tunnel, where we see we could have 2 bookshelves in a row, or literally you could have any other block, right? Even a flower pot would be hiding here, right? Or, right, again, this is just like the previous tunnel. You have 2 furnaces, no, 2 anvils on top of each other like that. So that would be fake. You might also see a flower pot on either side. In the previous tunnel, there was actually a flower pot on one of the sides. But in this case, there are no flower pots on either side. So if you do see a flower pot on either side, you know it has to be fake. That's basically it for that. And the other thing it has in common is this hay bale stack. Notice this is actually really similar to what we saw in the previous tunnel with the bookshelves, right? As you can see, there were bookshelves that formed an L shape. It was the opposite. It was the other way around, right? These hay bales also form an L shape, so if you see any deviation from that, for instance, this, you see a hay bale behind the stack, or if you see hay bales that go way too high up, then you know it's fake. So again, that's really exactly what we saw in the previous tunnel with bookshelves. Right, pretty easy. Another thing is over here, this is basically just like what we saw in the previous tunnel, right, where you could have a cauldron, right? If you see 2 cauldrons on either side like that, it's fake. Just like for the previous tunnel. And that's basically it for that. As for the furnaces, this is probably the least common block pile in this room. Honestly, I don't know why, but even though it's really close to hider spawn, it's actually the least common block pile to find a hider hiding in. If you do find a hider, it's typically going to be a furnace right here. Right? That's really all it is. Now, what do we have in this room overall that's new? Like, what is new that we haven't seen in any of the previous tunnels? We have these cells, right? We have these cubic or rectangular prism cells, right? Basically, this is the melon cell, right? We have a sheep cell, and at the end of the tunnel we have a hay bale cell and a TNT cell. So there's a total of 4 cells here, and that's really one big difference that we have in this tunnel and the previous tunnel. And so we're going to go over all those. Notice how each cell is surrounded, not surrounded, but like before the cells we have anvils before all of them. Right, but we're first going to go over all the block piles outside of the cells, some of which we've already gone over, right? So we're just going to do that first. So, as for the block piles that aren't in cells, right, we've already talked about the furnace stack. I guess another thing I forgot to mention is, just like in the previous tunnel, we could have a flower pot at this corner. Right, as for those, right, we've already talked about the furnaces, talked about the bookshelf and the anvil here, and we've talked about the hay bales. So now, all we really have to talk about, actually, like really, is these bookshelves stack and the note block stack. Those are the only 2 things we have to look at, but they're actually really similar to each other. Because it turns out that they're identical. They don't look identical, but they're actually identical. Right? They're just mirrors of each other. Right? Ignore this bookshelf for a minute. Just take a look, ignore this bookshelf and ignore the flower pots. Focus on these bookshelves forming the overall stack. Right? These bookshelves. 1, 3, basically 1, 3, 3. That's the same thing we have here. 1, 3, 3. It's just flipped around, right? In this case, it goes to the right, but in the case of the note blocks, it goes to the left. They're identical. They're just mirrors of each other. So that's one thing to observe, right, when noticing these patterns. Right? The most common thing to see is a bookshelf in the center of the stack like this. Right? But that's identical to if you were to... Oh wait, you can't even hide as a note block here unless a hunter breaks these grass blocks, which I'm pretty sure they still can. They can break the grass blocks as they go along. So like, hiders can't break them, but hunters can, right? As a hunter, you can break these grass blocks. Yeah, so I guess you can't find a note block hiding there, but basically that's the idea. I guess one comparison you can make is if you see like a bookshelf hiding right here, or a note block hiding right here. It's identical. It's the same exact, right? It means the same exact thing, right? Just like that, right? Just like that. So really, that's the idea. Flower pots, there's 3 total flower pots, right? You see 4, right? For instance, like on top of this bookshelf, it's fake, right? Anywhere else, I don't even know where they hide. There's three total flower pots, basically. That's basically it. As for the note blocks again, right? Again, they're basically identical to the bookshelf stack. It's just sort of mirrored. This bookshelf you don't really have to worry about. It's just there for some reason, but it's real. Last thing to go over before we talk about the cells is this cauldron in this bookshelf. You might of course see a flower pot hiding inside of the cauldron. As for the bookshelf, you'll see 2 bookshelves on top of each other like that. It's big. And that's basically the whole idea of it. I had to say that. That felt great to say. Like, that's basically the whole idea of it. Okay. Now let's talk about the cells. So we have the melon cell, the sheep cell, the hay bale cell, and the TNT cell. The easiest cell, by the looks of it, is of course the sheep cell. Sheep are pretty easy. There should be a total of 4 sheep. Right? As the game goes on, they tend to roam around a lot. Right? Usually they're not going to be all concentrated over here like they are in the beginning of the game. For instance, as you can see, this guy moved over here. Sometimes they'll move to the hay bale cell, as you can see, just like that. But I've even seen them move as far as literally to hide or spawn. I've seen it happen. Like literally, I've seen a sheep standing right here, and it's real, and it's a real sheep. It came from over here. It's happened. Many times you'll sometimes find like 3 sheep hiding in here, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to count it. But even if there's a sheep in there, right? Many times you're gonna find hiders hiding in this cell. Even if there's a sheep in there, all you gotta do is launch directly above the sheep. Launch directly above it. Don't launch directly at it, or else you won't hit any hider that's in there. But if you launch directly above it, you'll actually hit the hider that's in there. Just like that, you'll hit that. And so that's really the whole idea. If there's no sheep in there, it doesn't matter the height at which you hit it at, right? That's really the idea. But if there is a sheep in there, all you gotta do is launch a little bit higher than the sheep, like right there, and you'll hit the hider that's in there. Right? That's the whole idea. Obviously, you can go up there if you want, just takes a little longer. And that's basically the idea of it. That's it. That's basically it for this cell. Right, I'll talk about the anvils later. Now we're going to talk about the 3 other cells. The melon cell, the hay bale cell, and the TNT cell. It's a lot more common to find hiders in the melon cell than either the hay bale or the TNT cell. For some reason, the melon cell is a lot more common, probably because it's closer to hider spawn. But before we talk about the melon cell, let's talk about the thing that all these cells have in common. And it's this structure that we saw at the beginning of the game. They all have this same exact block pile in it, right, at one of the corners. So in this case, for the melon cell, we have it right here. For the hay bale cell, it's also at one of the corners, right? It's literally right here. For the TNT cell, it's right here. It's just flipped around. So as you can see, that same exact block pile occurs in all 3 cells, right? And this is what I was talking about, right? As you can see, the melon cell has it right here. The hay bale cell has it right here. The TNT cell has it right here. It's just flipped around. And that's really the common thing that occurs among all of those cells. So, now that we've seen that connection, let's just go over the melon cell and the specifics of it. So now we're going to be moving on to the specifics of the 3 cells. So starting with the melon cell, the most common thing to see in the melon cell, right? Notice how there's these 2 gaps between the block pile where you can find a melon hiding in it. Sometimes not even melons, but literally flower pots and chickens hiding there. So if you see that, it's fake, right? Anything hiding right here in this spot, typically a melon, it's fake. Right, also, if you see a melon in this hole right here, and you see we have a hole where a melon hides, it's fake. Alright, that's basically it for the holes, right? There's really 3 holes, right? Well, 2 holes. There's one here where you can find a melon hiding at, and then there's one here where you could find a melon hiding at. Right, another thing you might see is the melon stack goes way too high up, like right up here. Way too high up, that's fake. That same exact thing actually happens in the hay bale stack. Right, we'll get to it obviously, but as you can see, the same exact thing happens right here. So, even though we haven't gotten to it, I just figured I'd mention that just so we can draw those connections. Because being able to draw those connections makes it a little bit easier to memorize, you know, because our brains like to find patterns between things and it helps us remember them more. Right? That's basically it for that, but we do have a few more things to look at. For instance, right, if you see a melon right here, this is sort of one that you just gotta memorize, right? See a melon there, it's fake. Also, if you see 4 melons in a row like this, notice how it's 4 melons in a row vertically, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. This is fake. And also, I think this is, well, not the last one, but basically, right here, 3 melons in a row vertically, that's also fake. And that's really all it is, right? I guess also if you see a square of melons, I haven't really been mentioning it, but you do see a square of blocks. It's a museum, so it has to be fake. I don't think there's any squares that are real in this map. I'll have to look, because if it is, it's not really a common one that you have to know, because As for all the common spots, on the right side of the map, if you see a square, it's going to be fake. And I guess the last thing is, just remember the deviations between this, right? You gotta know what this specific block pile looks like right here. Right? Being able to identify those deviations includes, like, it's symmetrical like this. There's like the tail of it's really long, right? There's something like this, 2 in a row. And if you see a square with blocks, it's fake, or if it goes way too high up like that. Those are all the different deviations you can see with this melon stack one. That's basically it for the melons. Next, we'll head over here. We'll talk about the hay bales next. I don't know which one is more likely to find a hider, the hay bales or the TNT. I think it's one or the other, honestly, because it varies from game to game. The most common spot in this hay bale stack is to find a hider hiding in this hole right here. Right? Sometimes you'll find it, like, it's not like going to be every single game you find a hider here, but it's probably the most common spot, honestly. Another common spot is to find a hay bale hanging behind it, like right here. And again, if you see a hay bale that goes way too high up, just like we saw in the melon stack, that would be fake. Notice how, again, this is a square with hay bales, it's fake. Right? If you see a hay bale hiding like this, it's sort of similar to what we saw for the melon stack. Right? This is fake, or the melon cell. You see 3 hay bales in a row like this. It's fake. And I guess if you see 2 hay bales in a row, that's fake. It's not super common though. Alright, now let's talk about, again, the deviations of this specific block pile, which occurs in all of these cells. Again, if you see one where it's symmetrical like this, it's fake. Right, its tail is really long. Right, 2 in a row. Right, if you see a square of hay bales, or if it goes way too high up. Those are all the different deviations you might see. And also, if you see like a staircase, not staircase, but like it looks like that. Yeah, too long, it has to be fake. Now notice, this cell does not only contain hay bales, but it contains sheep because it roamed around. As you can see, they roam around a lot, so again. Okay, but really, they also contain flower pots, right? There should be a total of 5 flower pots in this cell. 3 on the left side, 2 on the right side. It's not very common to find flower pots here. But if you do, right, sometimes you'll even see flower pots in this hole. Which, as you can see, it can be a little bit more difficult to see if you want to just kind of check the block pile from here. It's still really difficult to see if it's a flower pot from this angle. You sort of have to go all the way up to it. So sometimes I literally just ignore it because, again, it's not super common. And I just get it later with radar if there is actually a flower pot. That's not that common. But again, 3 flower pots on this side, 2 flower pots on this side, right? I don't really know any of the spots over here for flower pots. But as for over here, I'd say the only real spot you gotta know about is this one, right? You see a flower pot right here. Right, or I guess a flower pot on the other side of this hay bale. That sometimes happens too. But that's really all there is for the flower pots in this cell. So the last cell we have to go over is the TNT cell. So, this is what we've gone over so far. We've basically gone over everything in this tunnel. Right? Pretty impressive, right? Right, we've done a lot. But now we're going to do our last thing, which is to talk about the TNT cell. Again, what do we know about it already? Well, for this same exact structure, as we saw before, right, that same exact structure is occurring in all of these cells, right? It's this one. It turns out it's actually really easy for us because it occurs twice in this cell, right? It occurs right here, and it also occurs right here, right? So as you can see, that same exact structure there and here. The only difference is that there's actually 2 blocks behind it. Turns out we actually have a cauldron right here, right? This cauldron is a real cauldron, right? So sometimes you'll find a flower pot inside of the cauldron for some reason, right? So that's that. Right, now as for deviations with this TNT stack, again, 2 in a row, symmetric, square of TNT, TNT goes too high up, and in this case you could actually find a staircase, right? As for the other cells, you can't really see this combination, but if you do, you can't. It's possible to see it from the TNT stack. So you see that's it's fake. All right, some other spots. So you can see 2 in a row. Again, it's a deviation from that structure, right? Symmetrical, right? Square of TNT. It's typically all you see. You usually don't see it go too high up right here. It's not really a good spot, I guess. You might sometimes see a TNT hiding next to it, like right here. Or again, a square of TNT, right? Squares, you should never see squares on the right side of the map. I don't know if that's true for the left side. I'll have to look at it again. But that's basically square of TNT. But another way to think about it is that you should have the ability to move within this regime, right? Without having to encounter a block here, right? You should have the ability to move through it. That's how you can know really right away whether or not this is fake. So you know there's a fake one there, right? And as for this, right, it is actually possible to go even higher than that, as you can see. So you can see it goes like 3 blocks up. That's how we know that's fake, right? So it goes way too high up. Also, you can have 2 in a row, or I guess 1 on top of the stack sometimes happens. That's really all there is for this TNT stack. As for the 2 lone TNTs, they're not that important. That's really all there is for this TNT stack. As you see, there's actually not much going on. So we've gone through basically everything. The only thing we haven't talked about are these anvils. But really, the anvils are actually really easy. Right? Turns out, notice the direction that the anvils face. Right? They only face in this direction. So if you were to hide as an anvil over here, they're not going to be facing it in the same direction as these anvils. And from what I've seen, like, they made an update where they tried to correct the orientation of them, but it did not really work. So it's actually going to be really easy to memorize them. Because, as you can see, they don't point in the same direction. And I don't believe they will as a hider. If they don't, then it will just come with experience. They'll be like, wait a minute, this is way too long, right? This is way too many anvils in a row. If the correction is made. As a hider, you can't physically see if the correction is made. But from the point of view of the hunters, they can see that. Or I think it's just from the point of view of another player. But you, as the hider, hiding as the anvil, can't see the orientation correction. Other players can, though. That's what I think that's what it is. But really, that's the idea. The only place where they are absolutely correct is over here. I think sometimes they even correct themselves the wrong way. So I think sometimes, like, even if they're hiding the correct orientation, they'll literally flip it the other way for some reason. As for the melon stack, right, you see 4 in a row like this, it's fake. It's probably the most common spot to find an anvil. As for all the anvils, it'd be 4 in a row right here. So you just gotta know that. As for the sheep, right, many times you'll find not many times, but like, from what I've seen, you'll find anvils hiding behind this anvil, not actually in line with them, but hiding behind it, like this. That's really all there is. I guess sometimes you'll see blocks in the back right here, but they're always fake, of course. You typically never see anvils hiding here. Like, if you do, sometimes it's right here. Like, I've seen it before. Right? And that's basically it. There's not much else to really mention. Right? And that's basically it for this tunnel, right? This concludes the end of the tunnel, which goes basically, it's basically the ideal place to go under ideal conditions, right? No good players, no blocks moving around, all basically players that aren't that good. You don't know anything about where anyone else is, no fireworks, no meows, nothing. The ideal place to go would probably be, right, from what I've seen, is to head in this tunnel and check for hiders. Right? And that is basically it for this video.